Welcome to another video coverage of This Week in Rails. I'm Dave Kimura, and today we have Greg bringing us the updates. And just so you know, I simply provide the video coverage of This Week in Rails. I don't actually produce the content. So let's go ahead and dive right in. For the first item, replace method source gem with Ripper. And with this change, Ripper is used to determine the last line number of a given test method to support running tests by line number. And the interesting thing that I've found about this PR is actually a piece about the mail gem 2.8.0, which I actually recently discovered that this was a recent update, and I found when I deployed my application with that updated gem that it was having trouble deploying. There was some what seemingly to be unrelated errors, but because I make small changes and deploy often, I was able to catch and narrow it down to that gem specifically. So I just put in the specific gem 271 in my gem file, and everything seemed to be deploying successfully again. And the next one, disable Rails console IRB's autocompletion in production by default. And if you ever have to go into the Rails console, especially if you're using a newer Ruby version that has the autocompletion, you'll notice that as you're typing out a method, then it'll show some autocompletion options. And if you're doing this in a production console, then you may notice a slowdown when connecting to remote servers. And so basically, it's just disabled by default now on production environments. And this is an interesting one because you can use the IRB use autocomplete environment variable, setting it to true if you do want to enable it. But I'm also a believer that if we are having to go into the production console for whatever reason, we shouldn't be typing in there. Instead, we should have already preformed scripts of what we are wanting to execute. Make sure that if there are any checks and balances in place, that those go through the approval process. For example, if you're going to run something in a production console, you have to bounce it off a teammate first. Then in those cases, then you have your scripts that you need to run. You can just copy and paste them in that production console. I find that it helps reduce a risk of human error where you maybe are just typing real fast and you accidentally drop a table or something like that you didn't mean to. So again, always use caution when you're in the production console. And the next one is an alias for the action dispatch response buffer. So before you would have write as the method, but now we just simply got an alias, so you can use either and it should work. And the motivation behind that is just make it a closer analog of IO. And the next one is to fix the IDs method that returns duplicate IDs. And this one that I actually never ran into, but it does make sense. So it is a bug fix. And so before, if you had a situation like this where you have a post, you're finding it by an ID, you're getting all the comments and you're counting, you have 5 records. If you take your post and eager load in the comments, you find all the posts where the ID is equal to 1, and then you're plucking the ID, then you would get an array of 5 items, all with the same ID. So with this, it's basically calling unique on there, so you're only going to get the one ID record back, and you're not going to get the duplicates of it. And the next one is support has rich text strict loading, and this one is very interesting because strict loading was released in Rails 6.1, and it basically means that it's going to raise an error unless if you're eager loading the contents. So with any kind of action text, you are going to be looking up the original record that has one rich text, but then if there's any attachments within there, then those could also be eager loaded. And so by having that strict loading and setting it to true, by default I believe it's setting to false, then you will actually raise an error if you're trying to use that rich text within your application without eager loading it first. And so that's all for this video coverage of This Week in Rails. Again, as with every episode, I would just like to thank everyone who has helped contribute to Rails in making it a better framework. So again, thank you all, and I'll talk to you again next week. Well, that's all for this episode. Thanks for watching.